Morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Eric Shiraev. We study international relations. Last time we discussed the subject of international law. Today we'll turn to international political economy. This is another vast area where you can find yourself in your employment, area of studies, lots of applications. It's quite an interesting subject. We will look at different theories, approaches to international political economy. We'll see how those approaches explain how countries interact in the economic context, and also lots of applications. We'll be focusing on applications and focusing on problems and their solutions, but also certainly I will describe some interesting approaches to international political economy. As always, we begin with a brief case in point, which will help me to bring us to this subject. And subject is, again, international political economy. Long time ago, but think about 1945, 1946, Europe was struggling. Almost no fuel, no food, no clothing, diseases, crime, governments remained weak, demands from people were quite relentless about doing something, changing something, and threat of communism grew. Lots of people demanded that things change, and things change quickly, just for them, for individuals. And those pictures you see farmers who produce their products, vegetables and fruit, couldn't sell them because workers didn't have money, and they didn't have money because they couldn't work. They couldn't work because factories were still not restored, and there was no money to restore factories, and no money to pay for law enforcement. That was a very difficult situation right there. In June of 1948, the United States decided to provide economic aid or assistance to Europeans who were devastated by the war. And due to the fact that one of the most active participants in this project was George Marshall, former US Secretary of Defense and then Secretary of State, well, this became known as a Marshall Plan. And in 1948, Congress approved first $5 billion in aid. It's $5 billion in monies of 1940s. Today, it's a significantly larger sum of money. And European countries, mostly Western Europe, receive substantial financial economic assistance. And I give you some numbers right here. So by 1952, the United States spends approximately $13.5 billion, so it's approximately $120 billion today. Why was this help provided? Why did Washington provide this help? American taxpayers, right? That's what was done. Well, to help the collapsing economies in Europe. We learned the lesson that the international economic system is always interconnected. So pieces that interconnected. And like in the national system in general, problems in one sector of the world will echo, and other sectors also will be affected. So it makes sense, so to help collapsing economies. Well, second, to give stimulus to US enterprises. How? Well, the United States would help restore a car making factory in Turin. So the Fiat, famous model. So restore the buildings, bring the machinery, the equipment, train engineers and workers right there. So they start producing cars. They need spare parts. They need parts for engines, they need parts for tires, they need repair professionals. Where do they get them? They have own people, right? Of course. But then we use American help. So American engineers and workers and manufacturers benefited because they needed to produce parts and details for a Fiat factory. And now think about many other factories and enterprises in Europe. In fact, just by giving money to them, your country or any country that gives money can generate the boost business within a country. And then, of course, restrain communism in Europe. It's a political goal. The first one, health collapsing, was compassion. It was just commonsensical goal based on compassion, understanding how system works. Second was domestic, right? Just help domestic businesses. But third one was political, to stop or at least restrain communism in Europe. Why? Because communist parties gave very simple solutions. Just we nationalize all the property in our countries. We will make work mandatory, and everybody will be working. We'll print more money. We will simply just cancel private property, and we'll restore order. We'll have one-party system, most likely, but we will do it quickly, and so we'll do it for all. And those promises were quite enticing and very persuasive in the minds of many. But to the United States and for British government, for German government, for Italian government, and for those who oppose communists, there was a threat of fundamental change of political order there. They didn't want to have it, and therefore economic aid, which was given to them, was used as a proof of a potential strength of governments, which were not necessarily pro-communist at that time. UK, Greece, Germany, just to give some examples, receive lots of things. And so the products like shoes and dresses and pencils, building materials and expertise, car manufacturing elements there. And Greece, among many things, shoes, for example, and clothes were shipped there, but received American mules from Missouri. So I think a few hundred, 700 of those mules were shipped to Greece to do what? To plow, because tractors wouldn't work because there's no gasoline. It's just logistics and parts. But mules, well, they're tough and big, and they help Greek peasants at that time. So multiple goals. You see, many economists suggest that was crucial. Many suggest that was an important, but it was helpful type of a policy conducted by American government and American taxpayers. Just the money just comes always from taxpayers. You and I pay taxes, and the budget just appropriates this money. Germany today, it's just a 1945 country, was essentially ruined today. As one of the examples, it's a BMW factory. Just almost everything is done by robots, and then just high-class production and quick. And this is one of the best examples of how economies work. And well, if the help was able to boost their many elements of their economy, can we do this similar Marshall Plan? Can we just present something like Marshall Plan to the world? We discuss global inequality, we discuss poverty, we discuss economic problems. Why don't we have excess of stuff, money, rich countries, European, North America, Asia. Just think about, sit down and have this Marshall Plan for the most poor economies in the world, to help them just get out of situation in which they are. We'll boost the global economy, we reduce global poverty, and so equality will be restored. And this is something for you to think about. Is such a plan achievable today or not? Why not? Just if it worked in Europe, it may work in other countries. We use analogy, right? To study international political economy, international politics. It has been working in the past. Why can't it work right now? This is a question for us to think about, and we'll try to answer during the class, but also think about for future discussion. International political economy is a study of how politics and economics interact in the national context. So it just makes sense. Here we pay attention to economic production. Creation of goods and services with a market value. And there are stronger countries, weaker countries, there are corporations, there are international corporations, but economic production is key here, key phenomenon which we study. GDP, gross domestic product, also important element that we studied, an important phenomenon or fact. So just the value of goods and services produced in given time. Countries with high GDP and low GDP. So there's a higher potential, lower potential. Consumption is a very important point here. consumption. It's a selection, adoption, use, disposal, recycling of goods and services. And the way we consume and what consume affect what is produced and what is manufactured and what is designed. Here, you don't forget, of course, in I1, that's distribution also is a very important point. Not only just what they produce and consume, but how you distribute among individuals and who gets what. Also important point here to consider. As always, there's no one single, always in social sciences, there's no one single theory that explains everything. It will be impossible, so boring to have one thing explains everything. Therefore, I just suggest at least 4 major approaches to consider, and we'll do briefly, of course. In realism or mercantilism, more common name for this approach in the studies of international political economy, economic liberalism. Then conflict theories and constructivism. So these are theory which we will examine together. And I have just here just kind of buzzwords which you can have and see buzzwords just to help you create associations between a name and then certain policies or certain practices. But I must remind that although these appear just another bunch of isms here, and the question will be, are they relevant to the real life? Of course they are, because all of those isms stand for specific policies, and specific policies stand for taxes, production, jobs or absence of such, opportunities, educational, professional opportunities, prosperity, poverty, life and death. So those isms have an important meaning in our lives because they result in something objective, tangible, concrete, something which is part of our lives. Mercantilism has been the oldest approach, and it's a term just to refer to things. So the merchant, as you know, this label of a profession. So just you trade in something, you sell and buy things. This economic view emphasized the importance of accumulation of resources and capital by states, as well as the state regulation of trade. Well, it made sense in the past. It makes sense today, but think about the past. You're a king or queen, and you have borders to protect. You have people who live in your territory. You're sovereign. You just control this territory. What do? You defend your borders. You need money just to have the army or navy. You need money to build roads and to maintain people happy, keep people happy, maintain the economies. And what do? Well, you try to find ways to subsidize home industry. So the peasants and manufacturers, they somehow benefit from your policies. You rely on domestic resources, because if you don't, you have to buy things from neighbors. Who knows, today you're friends with them, tomorrow they will fight against you. So you rely on domestic resources. Positive trade balance, don't borrow too much. Of course, kings and queens and shahs would borrow money, but if you borrow, you owe them something. If you don't borrow, you don't owe, so you're free to make your independent political decisions. Protectionism, you protect your domestic businesses. Expansionism and colonialism. If you're great power, big power, great, I mean just by size and might, just as you try to expand and conquer territories, let's face the reality how politics works, be it in Japan or Ottoman Empire or Russian Empire or many other empires. Or just you try to gain territories. To gain a territory is a good thing to do, to lose territory is a bad thing to do. It sounds awful, but that's the logic of mercantilism. Just the more you have, the better. Well, reduction in foreign competition, you obviously want to do as much as possible to have less competition, because if they compete against your products, your grain or corn you produce, or rice, and want to sell to other countries, and you have a competition, it definitely hurt your peasants and others. And exclusive trade with colonies, many strong powers, the British Empire, French Empire, Belgian Empire, Russian Empire, really wanted to create a situation or conditions under which they will have the exclusive right to trade with colonies and get as much from them and not let others get. And that's why wars took place, wars of conquest and wars about distribution of power. Well, it looks like it's an awful and mean approach, right? But it was part of life of our great parents and grandparents. of their grandparents. This was a common sense policy for almost all of them about how to live and how to conduct business and how to maintain economy, how to develop economy. Mercantilism is protectionism, as you saw, one of the elements right there. And how does it work? It's very easy. It's ABC of protectionism. Think about a country which produce orange juice and cost of it, just make it up, $3 per measure. $3, and the country definitely want to sell it, and the $3 is a cost. In the other country, oranges of the same quality produced, but the cost is $5. $5. Why? Different conditions, right? Using machines, not using machines, climates, and skills, and many factors affect the cost of a product. And you live in a country which produces oranges, and cost of them will be $5 per measure. As a prime minister, as a president, as a politician, what do? Just you simply allow people from country A to sell it, and just your farmers definitely will be starving because they can't sell their product, right? They can't because it's too expensive. So you buy something less expensive from foreign country and say they benefit and your farmers don't benefit. So the farmers certainly will lobby you so as not to allow the profit to go away. And government, you're a member of a government, you're a king, you're a president, you're a prime minister, depends on time, it depends on country. You make sure that you establish trade barriers or tariffs, taxes on import. You simply say the country which produces cheap oranges, look, you pay extra $3. So every measure you sell, just you pay extra $3 to our government. So you make the trade not really profitable for that country, but by doing so you support your farmers. If you think about but just things become more expensive. Yes, those who buy oranges have to pay more money. However, the entire class of farmers is protected because you protect them from foreign competition. That's the principles of mercantilism and protectionism. Somebody will be really unhappy that some farmers who produce inexpensive oranges. Somebody will be very happy the farmers who produce more expensive oranges. That's how things are. And to many people, protectionism is alive. In fact, when people ask a question, is it true that contemporary policies of many countries are protectionist? And this, yes, true. So the countries say that we protect our local business. European Union does it. Especially farmers, they protect farmers there. And historically, important industries such as dairy industry in Northern Europe and wine industry in countries such as France, Spain, Italy, is they're protected. Try to sell wine products in Europe if you're not from European Union. It's very difficult to break it because they protect on farmers. They consider them a very important social class, and they argue that it's important for government to protect their businesses. So typical protectionism, but it's about business. It's about people. It's not necessarily about being nasty and just arrogant. It's protecting manufacturers in many ways. Liberalism was a challenge to mercantilism. It's a belief and theory that only free markets, free trade, and economic cooperation can lead to a peaceful and prosperous world. Right? Just liberalism, just you liberate yourself from the chains of mercantilism. It is like mercantilism. It's not just a single theory. It's an approach. It's a mode of thinking. It's mode of action. And here, economic liberalism is about incentive, initiative, profit, common sense, competition, and also care for public good. Just at least what is declared. It's a result, of course. We often understand that. So what we want to receive is not necessarily what we receive. With every theory and every theory applied to real life. Economic liberalism promotes several important policies, such as deregulation, suggesting that the less we regulate industries, the more competitive they become, because those who are not competitive, they will disappear. Like farmers who produce oranges for $5 in my previous example. Well, too bad, of course, if they can't sell them, but maybe there are other farmers in the same country who can just find technology and invest money and start from scratch and make oranges that cost $2 instead of $5. And this is, again, some business which will definitely thrive. And if you produce expensive product, you will not be thriving. You'll lose the job, unfortunately. Opening domestic markets to competition, economic interdependence. The more you exchange, the more you share, the more you borrow from them, the better. I'll give you this in a more detailed way in this next slide. Low trade barriers. Economic liberalism is against barriers, suggesting that its governments have little to do with this. They can, but they should not interfere in the exchange of goods and services between individuals and countries. And also comparative advantage. Next slide will explain what it is, and also will help me explain why opening domestic markets is considered to be fine for economic liberalism. The comparative advantage theory is one of the most fundamental, one of several, but most fundamental concepts, approaches to international trade, international cooperation. So, and a theory that explains why it is beneficial for two countries to trade with each other instead of relying on their domestic production. Right? An example, which I will give it to you, is simplistic, but as any simplistic example, at least they describe the essence of an issue. Think about a country which produces excellent cotton and wool, and country B, just painted just here green, has great grapes, and country with cotton and wool makes wonderful dresses, and the great designers there, and excellent models made, and country with the grapes produce excellent wine or grape juice. So. Mercantilism would suggest that that's fine. Countries produce whatever they want, and if a country with excellent dresses want to produce excellent wine, they grow their own grapes and just make wine. What's the problem? Same thing, you make great grapes. Why can't you hire great designers and buy cotton wool? Just make something and just be independent, and that's fine. That's fine. However, here's a problem. Right there, so that the country which with excellent dresses will produce horrible wine and expensive and just really bad, and country with the good grapes and wine will not have great dresses for some reason. They'll be overpriced and will be awful. So be it, mercantilists would say. So be it, that's life. Continue living your life, and this is how things are supposed to be. Economic liberals say no. Country's supposed to establish free trade. And country A will overproduce dresses and just simply sell them to country with wine. And country with wine will overproduce wine and sell it to country with dresses. And result, so as mercantilism suggests, well, you have excellent dresses but awful wine. Excellent wine but awful dresses. Economic liberals say, no, both of you will have excellent dresses and excellent wine. And that's how things are supposed to be. See, examples always nice, and textbooks always describe things just in the cleanest possible way. Of course, things don't work exactly this way in reality. And today, arguments which definitely they rooted in the concepts of mercantilism and liberalism. So you prefer protectionism and protect your local market, local laborers, farmers, workers. Or you open doors and stimulate international trade and everybody benefits. Both sides say not so fast, not so fast. Free trade suggests this is the best policy. Free trade supporters suggest it's the best policy, and protectionists also believe that their policy is often better than free trade. Free trade is a large and ambiguous net gain for all countries and for the society, what economic liberals suggest. They believe that the market itself and price and quality of products and services determine winners and losers. You remember Blackberries? Maybe you don't remember. I do remember Blackberries. That's the devices which were most popular in US. President Obama had a Blackberry. Just he loved it, and just he was among the most active users of Blackberries. Where are they today? Have you heard about them? Well, they were just phased out because they couldn't compete with well, modern models of our smartphones, Apple in particular, and other models. They could not. So they restructured and they moved on. They moved on. Where are the typewriters? Well, it was a huge industry until 1980s. The typists, people would type, and where are they? Maybe you can find some in antique stores. And that's it. Just we move forward, and this is how life is moving ahead. Maybe 20 years from now, people will ask a question: what is Google? What is Google? And just what is TikTok? What's that? Just old-fashioned stuff. Nobody uses them anymore. That's how things are supposed to be. Free trade creates winners and losers, but the size of the winning from the trade are larger than losers. That is how life. Certainly, just you apply for an excellent graduate program and accept only 1 in 10. Of course, 9 people will be very upset about this, but this is life. This is life. We publish papers, we apply for a scientific journal, and often reject it. And so we know that maybe 1 in 7 or 10 articles is accepted. We understand that sometimes, well, this is not to definitely just to be so upset about, because this is how things are. Improve your quality of your work, and you'll be accepted next time. The protectionism supporters of this approach suggest that free trade is leaving large group of people in many countries vulnerable and unprotected. True that people gain a lot, and yes, there are many people lose a lot. Governments should play an active role in protecting the most vulnerable against free trade practices. Also, we understand this is true. This is true. Although we gain a lot, and people who have a low income in our country can get very inexpensive products in our stores, very inexpensive products, but the cost they pay is their jobs are lost. And so if I'm unemployed, if I go to a store and can get something for $2, say, but I'm unemployed, so what's best for me, to get a cheaper product or have a job and pay a little bit more for the product? It's a very important philosophical, political question. And also the arguments against free trade is that there's not actually free trade, because countries still use a variety of policies to protect their markets. Free trade today is again true. It's about global bureaucracy that manages the global economy. This is one of the problems always when we expand institutions. They always stay there. Bureaucracy is a system which never disappears. It tells them multiply and grow. You sit there and grow and grow and grow. You establish free trade, and you establish institutions to control free trade, and those institutions become bigger and bigger and bigger. If you travel to Europe, you always hear those complaints. That's how come people in Brussels decide on what to eat in southern Italy, right? And how to regulate restaurants in Greece and Italy, Spain, and other parts of the world, thousands miles away from the center or seat of a European Commission, the government of European Union. So both arguments are making sense. They do make sense, and the competition between these arguments what makes our life interesting and policies interesting, because there's always never stopping discussion. It should be. And we can use many examples about Boeing and Airbus, European agriculture, and Chinese policies, but you can read in the chapter, and I'll also mention briefly something about Chinese policies today. One of the illustrative examples is this one, that for many years India was reluctant to allow the giant food supermarkets to get in the country. And the question was that India must protect the local class of merchants, and the millions and millions and tens of millions of them who vendors just go and sell them. But supermarkets would essentially, with the cheaper products, with cheaper food, will destroy this type of business. But they see that the arguments, the supermarkets, the quality of products is much higher. You can argue about this, but definitely they're checked. Health inspections are there, and prices are there. They're refrigerated. The chances of getting disease are just extremely low compared to, unfortunately, you buy things from vendors. You never know what you buy, right? You see things, but the risk is much greater. So you win in quality and price, but you lose in the well-being of millions of people. That's always a question, always a problem. As we talk about those small family-owned stores or big supermarkets, yes, Family-owned stores often cannot compete with big supermarkets, but who wins, who loses there? And that's the question which is always questioned. We should ask it: philosophical, political, psychological, cultural, moral, and so many other aspects of this issue. Liberalism, which gained strength in all over the world in the 20th century, especially the first half of the 20th century, to replace mercantilism, unfortunately has been associated with economic cycles. We will not discuss why it happens, because books written about this and Nobel Prize have won to explain the economic cycle. But this is what free market and liberal economic system is well, sick with. Yes, sickness or a problem with. It's cycles. And those economic cycles not only about just getting bigger and more prosperous and then just relaxing. No, it's a terrible situations when people lose jobs and apartments, homes, and it was no joke. It still is no joke. But back in the 20th century, 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, it was not that smooth, and unemployment was huge. It was a big problem during the economic recession. And therefore, economists and political scientists turn to theories which try to somehow go in between mercantilism and liberalism. And one of them is, well, we call it Kansan Economy. It's named after John Keynes, British economist and founder of microeconomics. In very simple terms, his idea was, and simple terms and great mathematical support, just formulas and research, he suggested that's free trade and free exchange of goods and services and capitalism should exist, but they must be regulated, and governments should regulate business and especially finances. So the governments play a bigger role in how they regulate the economies. This slide ends on next slide. I explain well, terms that's essentially now connected with name of professor, well, it wasn't professor, just economist Keynes. Fiscal policy, monetary policy, interest rates, ideas of Federal Reserve were based on his and other economists' calculations and ideas. In other words, I give just you a suggestion that, for instance, a country faces high unemployment, people just simply looking for jobs, and for classical liberal economists, well, that's it. Well, that's it. This is how things are. We get sick from time to time. Just simply wait it out, and well, a few years later, it will be fine. Will be just fine. But Keynesian economics are just no. Just you simply just allow banks increase the supply of money to make it cheap credit. So it says businesses can borrow money because this credit is very cheap, and they just start hiring again. So if credit is cheap, you borrow money and just you start hiring. So employment increases, but employment may be connected to inflation. If everybody is employed, everybody is spending too much money in circulation, prices go up. It's essentially inflation. And so to reduce inflation, just you decrease the supply of money, make the credit more expensive, and businesses now slow down, start firing people, which may create unemployment. But instead of peaks and jumps and well, crushes, market will go just in those more or less soothing waves. Just will be economic upturn, downturn, upturn, downturn, but will not be those zigzags and scary moments for everybody. Well, that was perception of economists who we call Keynesian economists. And well, since 1940s, 1950s, European countries, most European countries, Western European countries, essentially accepted this point of view, and US also to some degree, suggesting that governments have something to do with economy, and they have instruments to do so. The differences are definitely seen, differences exist, and they are local, they are also rooted in national practices, and traditions, and other circumstances. quickly in constructivism. They're not really that powerful in international political economy, but the voice is still there. They emphasize the importance of specific ideas, identities, perceptions. Resources matter, but the practices matter too. Remember, constructivism is about how we see, how we shape, how we create cultures within institutions, and based on that, as we make judgments about international relations. Social, political, cultural conditions affect policies of countries. Economic policies, I can mention about national purpose, what the government wants to do with the resources it has, quickly, quick turnaround economy, mass mobilization, and some investment in something, or small structural changes and gradual growth. Economic climates, it's a very important issue. What is that? It's not, well, like weather, of course. If the weather is good, you attract visitors and guests. If the weather is not good, visitors not coming. If your economy is free of corruption, if a system is transparent, if bureaucracy is not vast, investors will come because they enjoy this climate. If everything is corrupt, non-transparent, and governments make intrusive decisions on every phase of your every aspect of a business, you will not invest, right? Just you pull out and just you go elsewhere where economic climate is more favorable. And as I put it here, favorable economic climate means lower cost to business, and therefore businesses will want to do insecurity, corruption should drive international investors away. Obvious, but definitely constructivism gives more sophisticated assessment of developments. And in the textbook, you see examples of how leaders of countries in the past would accept certain policies and how their individual ideas, individual incentives, and the visions of how economies should work, their own and their institutions that they created, how these policies change their countries for the best and for the worst. Microeconomics may have something to do with constructivism. The field of economics considers the behavior of consumers, companies, industries, and so well, what they do, of course, matter. Those of you who think of career of microeconomics also may combine this career with your activities in the field of international relations. Marxism, and I'm quick here to remember, key idea is a rejection of private property, a reliance on the poorest among the poor, the proletariat, lesser extent to peasants. People with no resources, in fact, they are true owners of resources. And they're supposed to gain power in establish a world system of equality called communism. Just the idea was in theory, and you perhaps remember this famous pyramid that's Marxists explained. It's just that only few people on top who rule. Those people who produce, they are the ruled, and things supposed to be done in a quite different way. So contemporary communists, or those who are close to this, they believe in the complete overthrow of capitalism as economic and political system. Not violent overthrow, but replacement of it by different models, such as nationalization of banks and big corporations. Small businesses can exist. If Marx were alive today, he would really be upset about this, but contemporary communism understands, or those who support the idea, that private property has a right to exist, but big corporations may not. Higher taxes on the rich, more social spending, and rigorous social control over banks and corporations. And that's one of the demands of contemporary Marxism. Well, one of the echoes, it's not really Marxism, but it's share the same spirit, I guess, and same type of attitude. The dependency theory, or dependency theory, it's not a theory, just cluster of ideas, but the view that the world economic and trade system has been set in a way which is beneficial for rich nations, but not for others. There's a global north, which predominantly rich technology-driven countries, North America, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and a few others. I can say Dubai could be here, just and Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait could be just placed in this category, and also global South, predominantly agricultural countries that depend on rich technology-driven global North. And that's an inequality, and that is a problem, structural problem for the world. And the problem is structural. And if we change this, if we somehow reduce the gap between North and South, that will be the most important part of international politics. When countries will lose, or we will simply will not have any real reasons for conflict if we become economically equal. So economic equality, or the reduced gap between economically powerful countries and less powerful. The reduction of the gap will reduce the reasons and sources of conflict. A simple example, that's those who support ideas of dependency theory see that that's the energy consumption in the world. Today, you see the gap. United States is to your left. It's per capita energy consumption, and it's the rest of the world. You see how much energy people consume. And the idea has been just to make sure that it's not necessarily that's the countries here supposed to somehow give up everything, but to make sure that these countries get also their share with the help of most powerful countries. Of course, understand this is very difficult to implement. However, well, let's see. When we turn to forecasts and projections, we'll look again at those theories and see how they propose the world of the future for us. But the biggest problem, and so we're close to conclusion, biggest problem, challenge when we look at economic theories today is which way countries choose to develop their economies and trade in the coming 5, 10, 15, 20 years, your lifetime. And certainly those labels which I use, I understand they are very, very approximate, and labels may mean many things to many people. However, the term Washington Consensus refers to policies that suggest that countries that really want to get rid of poverty and develop modern economies, they will get loans and help, but loans and help not just given unconditionally. They are given when countries reform and they deregulate the economies and make them transparent, and governance become less intrusive and less corrupt. And liberalism is accepted as a point of view, as a policy. So in other words, you get the money, but you reform the economy and make sure that there is no unfair competition in your country. The Beijing Consensus, the term which I don't think just who coined, but few scholars in the past wrote about this, but there we go. It's a point of view suggesting that no, this is not what countries want. If you want to develop your economy and choose your own way, just choose your own way. But this must be strong government, must be authoritarian government, must be government control of industries. In other words, it's state capitalism. So China is a country which ruled by Communist Party. It's a Marxist party, but they moved away from fundamental principle of Marxism. It's anti-capitalism. That's what Marx promised to the world. But its contemporary policy of Beijing is capitalism, but state capitalism. The party, few elite individuals control capitalism and manage it. So it's mercantilism over liberalism. And in many ways, this is also associated with economic nationalism. In my last slide here, I show the dynamics of world economy and in conjunction with theories that became dominant at certain periods in history. So brown boxes indicate some historic periods. Right? Some economic growth of the West, beginning of 20th century, Great Depression, communist revolutions in Russia and China, and then economic success of the West, and reforms in China, collapse of communism in Europe, global economic crisis, which began in, well, 2008 and continued later on. And we hope we're coming out of this crisis. And liberalism was a main concept which dominated the minds of people in power in many countries, beginning of the 20th centuries. Marxism became enticing theory and also captured the imagination of millions and billions of people in the 20th century. Well, then Great Depression moved Western countries to accept state regulation. Remember Keynesian economics? So yes, capitalism is okay, but must be regulated. Governments play an enormously important role in this process. And then again, turned economic liberalism, again, associated with the success of the West, especially its late 20th century, 1990s, and first period of the 21st century. And then the appearance of Asian models. It's also an awkward term, but it's as a label I think is appropriate. Asian models essentially are those models that combine capitalism, state regulation, and also they insist that's Eastern values. It's obedience to authority, respect to the elderly, respect to the bosses, just being politically inactive, so respecting order, and so just limiting free speech. So hard work and sacrifice, those values are typical Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Asian values, not Europeans. Europeans are more free speech and discussion things and free will and individual rights, which is questionable statement, of course, but I'm describing the idea. So the world, contemporary world, will be developing a prosperous economy only when they accept Asian models. So it's a strong government, capitalism under control of government, and also those values of hard work and dedication and commitment. And this is what say China is supposed to bring to the world. So will it happen or not? Will be a new Keynesian economical reform in countries just will adopt more government regulation of economy and more government participation, or will be economic nationalism when countries will just finally just move back in their shells and say, well, we tried liberalism for so many years, we made progress, but not fast enough. Let's now take care of our resources. Every country will take care of the domestic market, help workers and peasants, and then we'll see how we will do things 20, 30 years from now. Obviously, the United States turned more to economic nationalism since 2016, but we shall see how things will turn out in the future. It's just it's not about one single president or somebody who's next. It's about institutions. It's about people, how they feel. It's about researchers, scientists. It's about economists. It's about public opinion. Also, it's about the international situation. Very complicated, very interesting, very enticing field. And this field, which certainly will be mentioned in our future lectures when we discuss security again, when we discuss human rights, when we discuss ethnic policies and national identities in countries, when we talk about future of the world. Environment is huge subject here, and we will talk about environment in the near future. Meanwhile, this is it for today. I'm Eric Shiraev. Don't forget to look at the practice questions and definitely study the textbook. And so wish you good luck. And next time we will turn to re-examine new security issues and violence in the world, and so look at security from position of second decade of 21st century. So I'll see you later. Thank you.